Every Friday, a distinguished intellectual comes in and breaks it down so that even I can understand it.
Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Who would that be, Brian? You got a later program coming on here?
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Robert A. Heineman, Harvard University Professor Emeritus of Political Science.
My pleasure, Brian, usually.
Summing up the big national news of the week. Former White House Counsel Don McGahn on orders from President Donald Trump publicly. McGahn pulls a no-show at a House Judiciary Committee hearing where they wanted him to testify. Justice Department says Don McGahn does not have to show up because they say the White House's attorney is not subject to congressional demands to explain what he does at the White House. What do you make of that?
No, I think you're getting pretty close to attorney-client privilege there. And plus, you've got the whole area of executive privilege where communications with the president are basically immune from investigation and being made public. So I think the White House is pretty strong ground there. Yeah.
House Speaker Democrat Nancy Pelosi was about to go into a meeting with President Trump and Senator Chuck Schumer the other day. Just before the meeting, Pelosi gave a statement to the press that the president was guilty of a cover-up on the Russia collusion investigation. So, Trump called the meeting off. It was going to be about infrastructure. Trump called it off. And basically what he said was until they stop harassing him with endless investigations, he's just not going to deal with the top Democrats anymore at this point. Is he right to do that?
Well, I don't know if he's right to do it, but you can see what he's doing. What he's basically doing is focusing on the Democrats' focus on all these things that are basically irrelevant to what most people think is important in this country. And obviously infrastructure is tremendously important. And instead the Democrats want to spend their time getting hold of the president's tax returns, getting hold of the Muller report, getting into all kinds of other private functions and such the president's been involved with, which most people, frankly, don't care about one way or another. And I think what Trump is trying to do is say, well, look, here the Democrats are continually going on about this. You got this guy Nadler going on, and is it Schiff pushing for impeachment? And Pelosi's right in a way. Trump, I think, simply is saying, all right, you guys, if this is what you want to do, go ahead, focus on this, and let the rest of the country basically wonder why we're not getting anything done and why we're not dealing with some of the really important problems, and he's just going to lay it on the Democrats. So if that's what the public wants is impeachment and President Trump's tax returns and such after a couple of years and Trump's defeated and whatever, and the country's a few bridges collapse, which I hope they don't, but I'm telling you, the infrastructure's in pretty bad shape. It's just, it's kind of tragic, really.
Dr. Bob, it's a big thing in New York state politics. You see that State Attorney General Tish James wants Trump's tax info out there, and the state Senate, now Democrat-controlled, and the state Assembly, which was always Democrat-controlled, at least in recent history, the whole thing, the whole Democrat machinery is coming together in New York State. They want to see these tax returns. Also, the state legislature is working to make it so illegal for New York State prosecutors to go after anybody who Trump pardons. Is this a winning issue for New York State where there's a lot of Democrats and a lot of dislike Trump?
Point wrong there.
What's that?
Pardon? What's that about Trump's pardon?
Yeah, they're working on legislation to make it so that if Trump pardons someone in Washington and this person lives in New York State,
right,
and it said related to, and I don't know if that means Don Jr. or anybody that lives in New York State that's connected to Trump. I was unclear on that. But they want to be able to prosecute anybody that Trump gives a federal pardon to.
Oh, I see. That obviously would end up in the courts, and there is something known as double jeopardy, so that there are quite a few cases involved where if someone is given immunity at one level and testifies, then he can't turn around and be prosecuted at another level in these kinds of situations. So it's a federalism question, and I'm not certain the state can do that. On the income tax point, I think you have the whole issue of the privacy of a person's private business, and of course, the state income tax of Trump has been vetted by the New York State Tax Department. And I assume there's nothing there that has been found to be illegal or wrong. If it has, I assume it's been corrected. So why would the New York State have the right to take this and make it public and make it available to the state legislature? I don't think, I assume that the Trump people will challenge this in court, and I think they have pretty good grounds, frankly. The problem is not so much Trump's, and of course the whole idea here is if you get Trump's income tax, state income tax made available, then obviously it's going to give an entree to his federal income tax, because again, the state income tax, a lot of it's based on your federal returns. But the point is, once you do this to Trump, then you can do it to anybody. You can take anybody's tax returns and make them. And what's the basis for doing this? Is there some substantial or basically convincing basis that somehow Trump is engaged in illegal activity? The whole idea, I think, is basically just to embarrass him. And I don't think the courts are going to stand for that.
Now, what would Trump's reasoning be for not wanting all his tax info out?
He doesn't want to be embarrassed.
Why would he be embarrassed?
Well, because I'm sure he's taken all kinds of deductions and made other kinds of depreciation. You know, there are all kinds of things in there that
he wasn't born into politics. He didn't start out in politics. So the argument I've heard from some conservatives is, he had some tax shelter things, and he doesn't pay as much as he possibly can.
Well, and nobody does, do they? I mean,
which is the point, right?
Yeah, right.
At least for the person filling out the tax forms.
He follows the advice of his accountants and his attorneys, a few of whom are in jail now. No, it's clearly an attempt simply at sort of vindictiveness and embarrassment. And again, I think the courts are going to be pretty skeptical about this whole thing.
Now, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, since that big meeting that didn't happen on infrastructure that Trump called off, Pelosi's been going around saying that Trump secretly wants to be impeached because Trump knows it would be an unpopular move if they went ahead with impeachment proceedings.
Yes.
And Pelosi and Schumer have been saying, he had a temper tantrum and he really wants to be... I'm not sure if Schumer says he wants to be impeached. Pelosi says that. What do you say to that?
Well, I think she has a point. I think that from Trump's point of view, go ahead, get it over with, do what you want to do here, and then let the public decide whether they're in favor of you spending your time on this sort of thing. And I still have no idea why you would impeach the man. I mean, with Bill Clinton, who was in fact impeached, you can understand why he was impeached. But the fact that Trump is abrasive and arrogant and vindictive is, I don't know if that's a high crime or misdemeanor, frankly. So I think you got to have some basis here. And again, I suppose, if you're going into impeachment, you'd have hearings and testimony. It would take up a huge amount of time. Of course, the press would be going nuts on this. And frankly, not much else would be done in this country. And there are some things that do need to be done. It's just...
Yeah, on that topic.
Yes.
On that topic, when Nixon was being investigated for the Watergate Hotel break-in, the Democrat headquarters at the Watergate Hotel, Reagan was investigated for Iran-Contra. Bill Clinton was basically investigated for a lot of womanizing. Did legislative leaders during the Nixon era, Reagan era, and Clinton era get so caught up that nothing else happened?
No, I think not.
Is that happening now, or is the press not doing its job and just telling us the investigation stuff?
Well, I think nothing much else is happening. That's unfortunate. First of all, you have a Republican Senate and a Democrat House, so you got those two chambers banging heads against each other, and then you got to get it past the president. And on this whole infrastructure bill, which everybody thought the president had pretty much agreed to go along with, you get it to the House, you get it to the Senate, and now we got the president. Not that it's gone through either one of those houses, don't get me wrong. They're trying to put together a proposal, but now that you got the president unhappy, I guess he said, I've had enough.
It would get tiresome. We're talking to Alfred University Professor Emeritus of Political Science, Dr. Robert Heineman, on the topic of impeachment. Democrat Adam Schiff, the California congressman, he keeps pushing for it. Pelosi seems to almost be in a situation where she does not really want to do this.
No, I think that's,
and maybe that's why she's saying Trump wants it to happen, or maybe she's right. I don't know.
Well, no, I think she definitely doesn't want to go down the impeachment road. And her problem is she's got this whole cadre of left-wingers or progressives who really want the president impeached and feel that, I guess maybe that's what their constituents want. I don't know. I doubt even Maxine Waters' constituents are terribly enthusiastic about spending a lot of time on impeachment. But there's a lot of personal vindictiveness and bitterness here. And so these guys are going to show President Trump he can't push him around. Well, maybe he can. I don't know. But go ahead.
What do you make of Muller, Robert Muller, not wanting to come before Congress to talk about the Mueller report?
Can you blame him? I mean, why would you want to do that?
What situation does that put him in? They want to get him to say things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if they get him under oath or not, but yeah, they want him to divulge various aspects, maybe try to embarrass Attorney General Barr. And no, I think Mueller's view probably right now is I've done my job, 2 years, $25 million, and that's my conclusion. And
if Mueller crossed Barr at some kind of congressional hearing, how would Barr react, the Attorney General?
I have no idea. I don't know. We need to spend too much more time on this, Brian.
That reminds me. We got to take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk, among other things, New York State and the Senator Cathy Young seat in the Senate.
All money managers might seem the same, but while some give their clients cookie-cutter portfolios, Fisher Investments tailors portfolios to your goals and needs. Some only call when they have something to sell. Fisher calls regularly, so you stay informed. And while some advisors are happy to earn commissions whether you do well or not, Fisher Investments fees are structured so we do better when you do better. In other words, we're on your side. Maybe that's why most of our clients come from other money managers. So if you're in or nearing retirement, talk with us and find out why investors are switching to and staying with Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments. Clearly better money management. Investments in securities involve the risk of loss. Visit us at FisherInvestments.com.
Back with Dr. Robert A. Heineman. Dr. Bob, let's talk about the Cathy Young seat. Senator Young steps aside, and you've talked about the situation that Senator John Flanagan, the Long Island Republican Senate leader, put Senator Young in after Senator Young tried to oust Flanagan from his seat, and the political payback that Flanagan inflicted against Senator Young, putting her in a pretty weakened situation when she'd been in a pretty powerful situation up to that point.
Yes.
So right now it's Allegheny County Legislative Leader Kurt Crandall and Chautauqua County Executive George Borrello.
Handpicked by Mr. Flanagan to be the candidate. As we've said before on here, Mr. Akshaw called our people and said,
Fred Ashkar, the Binghamton State Senator,
Akshar,
Republican.
isn't it?
Was that?
I think it's Akshar. But in any case, he's a whip for what's left of the Senate Republicans, and tried to tell our county chairman to move Crandall out of the race, which our county chairman was not about to do. No, it's a really ugly situation, and I think we'll just have to let this develop a little bit more here. I think there are a few things coming down the pike.
Now, the primary for this is coming up June 25th.
June 25th, yeah, about a month now, yeah. Yep.
Tuesday, June 25th.
Yep.
All right, that'll be an interesting one to watch.
I think so. I hope so.
Before I move on to states wanting to change the electoral college system.
I thought maybe we'd talk about Ed Cox and Mr.
Yes,
Langworthy.
that's one of my next questions.
Oh.
That was my third question, but go ahead.
Well, what's your next question?
My next question was Governor Cuomo shutting down Saunier, the prison over in Livingston County.
That's a big problem, and again, it shows you the weakened position that the Senate Republicans are in after Mr. Flanagan totally deep-sixed the last election, and there aren't enough Republicans left to make much difference there. But the important point, I think, is that Livingston County, the prisons up there are important not only in Livingston County, but are tremendously important to Steuben and Allegheny counties. And I think it just shows how close Allegheny and Livingston County have in terms of common interests there. And so I'm sure it's very important to Mr. Crandall to speak out on this, and it goes to show again how important having an effective local senator would be in this situation. But again, the state Senate Republicans are in no position, really, one way or another, to do much in this situation after Mr. Flanagan and Akshar have pretty much led them down the swirling us around the bathroom drain, I guess is the way to put it. So it's not good at all.
Okay, New York State Republican Chairman Ed Cox has been replaced.
Well, no, he is not.
Excuse me?
He is not.
Nick Langworthy hasn't replaced him?
He is not.
Tell us about that.
Well, Mr. Cox will step down after the June 25th primary when the New York State Republican Committee will meet and choose a new state chairman. And he's agreed to step down, and Mr. Langworthy then will become the New York State chairman.
Okay, I jumped ahead a little bit so that I was erroneous on a technicality.
Well, he's still New
York State Republican chairman.
Yeah. So the point is, the question is, did Mr. Langworthy have the votes to unseat Mr. Cox? And given some of the public statements, you would have thought that he did. But my friends and insiders on the whole process say that a number of those statements of support were not very strong, and the fact is that, or the possibility is very strong, let's put it, that Ed Cox, if it had come head-to-head, would in fact have been reelected, that a number of those votes or commitments to Mr. Langworthy were a little weak. But I think Cox and Langworthy both understood that if that happened, the blowback would be, really pretty serious. And so I think Ed took the view that it's better just to step aside and keep this thing on a halfway mellow level and let Mr. Langworthy take over. And Mr. Cox then will go on to some position on the National Committee, and I think he maybe can be very helpful there in terms of helping President Trump get reelected. A number of aspects of this come into play. One is, of course, Western New York, from the very beginning, has been a strong supporter of Trump. Not only when we were pushing him for governor, as you remember way back, but when he ran for president. So I think Trump's people tended to be pretty supportive of Langworthy. And how much they interfered there or intervened, I don't know. But I think they probably pretty satisfied with this outcome. And the fact is, Mr. Langworthy has a tremendous amount of energy and worked very hard here to secure the state chairmanship, and has had quite a bit of success in Erie County winning elections. So whether you like some of his hangers-on up there in Erie County or not is kind of by the board in that sense, because a lot of people felt that it was time, there had to be some transformation here for the Republican Party at the state level. And Langworthy presents one option, and we'll just wish him the best.
Langworthy says his goal is to get a Republican governor elected. Is that possible?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Whether it's possible to get a Republican state Senate or a Republican state Assembly, that's a much longer prospect. But in terms of actually getting somebody statewide, Attorney General, Governor, what have you, that's possible. And so we wish him the best there. But, the last time we had a really strong candidate there, Mr. Astorino from Westchester County running, Mr. Flanagan in the New York State Republicans in the Senate undercut him. They did not support him. They didn't go out there and campaign against him, but they really gave him little support at all because they had to deal with Cuomo, basically, to support him on important issues. So Cuomo undercut the Democrat opponents in a number of those state Senate races, and the Republicans just backed off on the governor's race. So that's the sort of thing you run into in New York State politics, and Mr. Langworthy will have to figure out how to work around that.
Any thoughts on who's going to be the GOP candidate for governor next time around?
No, we don't have anybody pushing anybody yet. The basic problem here has been, as with Astorino, where he didn't get strong support from the party across the board, and Molinaro, who just ran, they get promises of money and support, and then all of a sudden it sort of just disappears. And Cuomo, of course, has such a huge war chest that, and he's an effective campaigner. So it's going to have to be somebody who has considerable personal wealth and is pretty effective out on the stump. And probably it should be a woman. But again, I'll just have to look around and see what pops out of the woodwork there. Dr.
Baum, one final question. I heard from numerous Republicans who privately complained to me that the Libertarian candidate, Larry Sharpe, was going to help Cuomo win.
Yeah.
Do you see Larry Sharpe wanting to run again now that he's got enough votes? He was doing that for another reason, from what I understood. He was trying to get the Libertarians something on the national ballot.
Well, on the state ballot.
State ballot, okay.
Yeah. Did he get enough to get along?
Yes, I believe he did.
Yeah. Well, that's one step, and there's no question but what the Libertarian vote undercuts the Republican vote to a great extent. I don't think there's any question about that, because people who tend to vote Libertarian would be pretty conservative, and so, yeah, and there's no question that hurts the Republicans. Now, there is an effort in the state Senate to do away with fusion voting, as they call it, which was you get on separate lines and you can add the totals. Now, in the case of Libertarians, it doesn't make any difference, because obviously, you could, I guess, have a Republican run on the conservative, Republican, and Libertarian lines. I suppose that's possible, but generally not. And the result is that the libertarian line then, it's not a question of fusion, it's a question of just taking votes away from the Republican candidate, and 5 or 6% of the vote can be enough to make the difference, that's for sure.
Yes. Now, if your ultimate goal is to unseat Governor Cuomo and you see these other third-party candidates taking votes away from the Republicans, then you'd say, the Republican had the best chance and all these third-party candidates are messing it up. But a lot of these third parties argue that it doesn't matter who gets in, Democrat or Republican. It's the same problem. It's the same system. In fact, Larry Sharpe said that a lot himself. What do you make of that argument?
Well, I think it's coming from some party people who are not in what we might call the mainstream. And so from their perspective, the Democrats and Republicans are all sort of part of the same cloth. And they would not be, but obviously they don't come anywhere near a majority anywhere. And so
the Libertarians.
Now here and there you see the working family line edge up toward picking up a seat of one sort or another, and here and there maybe a conservative candidate might. But the conservatives are pretty much part of the Republican umbrella anyway. The working families, they tend to get out there on the edge a little farther for the Democrats. But no, libertarians could be a problem, that's for sure.
We've been talking to Dr. Robert Heineman, Alfred University political science professor emeritus. Want to thank you very much for coming in once again.
Well, thank you for being kind, Brian.
We'll always take you in, Dr. Bob.